The year is 1877. San Francisco is packed with grand cathedrals, towering buildings, and architecture that rivals old Europe. But here's what doesn't make sense. Just 27 years earlier, this place was supposed to be empty land, wooden shacks, cowboys on horses. Today, we're diving into the hidden mystery of San Francisco's impossible construction timeline, because something about the official story doesn't add up, and the more you look at the evidence, the stranger it gets. I grew up learning that San Francisco was the Wild West frontier, a place where pioneers arrived in the 1850s searching for gold. The textbooks showed simple wooden buildings, saloons, dirt roads, horse carriages, just a small settlement trying to survive. Then I saw photographs from 1877, and my entire understanding shattered. These weren't photographs of a frontier town, not even close. They showed massive stone cathedrals, granite columns, ornate towers, buildings that looked like they belonged in Rome or Paris. And all of this was supposedly built in less than 2 decades. Let me show you the problem more clearly. According to the official timeline, San Francisco in 1851 looked like a basic Western town. There's even a photograph from that year showing wooden structures and dirt paths. Nothing impressive, just the beginning of a small settlement. But fast forward to 1877, only 26 years later, and the city is completely transformed. Photographer Eadweard Muybridge captured sweeping panoramas of San Francisco that year, and what you see in those images is, honestly, stunning. Cathedral spires reaching into the sky, massive stone buildings lining every street, architecture that would normally take centuries to develop organically. So here's the question. How does a city go from wooden shacks to European-level grandeur in just 26 years? With horse-drawn carriages as the main transport, with no modern construction equipment, with quarrying and moving giant granite blocks using 1850s technology. The math doesn't work. Think about it practically. These weren't small churches, they were grand cathedrals with intricate stonework, the kind of projects that took generations in Europe. Yet we're expected to believe American cowboys built them in less than 3 decades, while also dealing with a gold rush and rapid population growth. There's another problem. Most Americans during this period were Protestant Christians. Their church tradition emphasized humble wooden structures, not the grandiose Catholic-style cathedrals we see dominating the San Francisco skyline in these photographs. So who built these massive stone churches, and why? I started digging into the official timeline on Wikipedia. The history goes like this. Almost nothing existed in San Francisco until 1849. The first hotel was built around then. Various clubs and societies formed in the following years. But between 1849 and 1875, the timeline mentions almost no major construction projects. In 1863, there's one entry that caught my attention. It says the Cliff House was rebuilt. Not built, rebuilt. That's a massive structure on the coast. If it was being rebuilt in 1863, when was it originally built? The timeline doesn't say. It just mentions the rebuilding as if the first construction never mattered. Between 1863 and 1875, only one building project is listed, the Grand Hotel. That's it, just one hotel in 12 years. But we know from photographs that dozens of massive stone buildings existed by 1877. Cathedrals, courthouses, towers, stadiums, arched monuments. None of these are mentioned in the official timeline. It's like they appeared out of nowhere. The timeline mentions the Baldwin Hotel being built between 1875 and 1877. But what about the entire city of monumental architecture visible in every photograph from that era? Where's that construction project on the timeline? Here's where it gets more interesting. There's a painting from 1860 by lithographer Lauren de Roy. It shows San Francisco as a developed city with substantial buildings. The 1877 photographs prove this painting was accurate. The architecture matches. But 1860 is only about 10 years after the supposed gold rush beginning. How do you build an entire European-style city in 10 years using 1850s technology, unless some advanced capability existed that we're not being told about? I found something else in historical newspaper archives. The Library of Congress keeps old newspapers digitized. I searched for early mentions of San Francisco. What I found challenges the entire official story. In the Southern Telegraph from August 15, 1838, there's an article about San Francisco. That's 1838, more than a decade before the city supposedly started. The article describes San Francisco as providing anchorage for ships of the largest class. It says the harbor is too well known to require notice. Read that again. Too well known to require notice in 1838. How can a city be well known and hosting large ships in 1838 if it didn't exist until the 1850s? Another newspaper, the Madisonian from March 18, 1942. It discusses San Francisco as an established location, not a new settlement, an established city. I found a Hawaiian shipping arrival schedule from 1840. It lists San Francisco as a regular port of call. This is exactly what you'd expect from a major naval harbor city, not a frontier outpost. For San Francisco to look the way it did in 1877 photographs, it would need to have been established for hundreds of years. That's how long organic city growth takes without modern technology. You don't build that kind of urban density in 20 or 30 years. So what's really going on? My assessment is that a major city existed in that location long before the 1850s. The structures were already there. Then something happened. San Francisco experienced several mysterious great fires in the late 1800s. Then a massive earthquake in 1906. These events destroyed or damaged many buildings. Some structures were repurposed as temporary exhibition buildings for world fairs. They were labeled as newly constructed fair buildings. Then, after the exhibitions, they were torn down or altered. This created the illusion that they were temporary structures built just for the fair. But here's the thing. There are no photographs of these alleged fair buildings being constructed in the years before the exhibitions. No construction site photos. No work-in-progress images. They just appeared, fully formed. The alleged temporary structures match the architectural style of other buildings in San Francisco that are considered permanent and real. Look at the Ferry building, for example. Its design matches many of the World Fair structures. They all share the same cultural and architectural heritage. They belong together. I decided to investigate the Ferry building more closely. When you visit the Ferry building in San Francisco today, there's a plaque on the third column from the left. It states the building was erected in 1896, but there's something unusual about this plaque. An old film circulated online showing what appears to be the same plaque, but it read 896 instead of 1896. The video was stored on a website, but mysteriously disappeared without explanation. I searched for construction photographs of the Ferry building. Nothing. 20 minutes of searching produced no construction images. For such a massive and important building, you'd expect documentation of its construction, but there's nothing. The architect was Arthur Page Brown. His Wikipedia page reveals something strange. He died the same year the Ferry building was supposedly erected. The building opened in 1898. It was erected in 1896, designed in 1892, but Brown died in 1896. By the time the public saw the finished Ferry building, nobody could ask the architect any questions. He'd been dead for 2 years. Brown's architectural portfolio is thin. He designed a relatively plain private house in San Francisco. Then suddenly he's designing the biggest building in San Francisco. There are only 2 structures attributed to him. And I could only find one photograph of Brown himself. The supervising architect was Edward R. Swain. I found almost no information about him. For two men who allegedly designed one of San Francisco's most iconic buildings, the historical record is remarkably sparse. Official history tells us an older ferry building stood at the same location before the current one. There are many photographs of this older structure from different angles. It supposedly stood there from 1775 to 1898. But I also found photographs from the same time period where the old ferry building is completely absent. Same location, same era, but in some photos it exists and in others it doesn't. This suggests possible photographic manipulation. Early photoshopping to alter historical records. Look at a map of San Francisco from 1878. It shows the city layout in detail. At the end of Market Street, where the ferry building should be, there's a structure visible, but you can only see the very top of it. If you examine it closely, the tip looks more like the current ferry building than the older one historical records claim stood there. Here's another oddity. Every photograph of Market Street from before 1898 that points towards where the ferry building would be has that area whited out or obscured. Why would that specific area be consistently hidden in photographs if there was nothing to hide? There's a drawing labeled as a proposal for the new ferry building design, but perhaps it's not a proposal. Perhaps it shows what was actually there before the official construction date. Many structures in old San Francisco and across the United States resemble what ancient Rome supposedly looked like, not something cowboys would build in a few decades. These are buildings that require generations of architectural tradition and construction expertise. Mission Dolores is considered the oldest building in San Francisco. Official records say it was built in 1782. That's 1782. Apparently, this pillared structure with classical architecture was the only building in the area until the 1850s gold rush. Does that timeline make sense? A sophisticated stone building with columns in 1782, then nothing for almost 70 years, then suddenly an entire European city appears in 20 years. We've been shown one version of the 1800s American West: pioneers in covered wagons, log cabins, dirt roads, simple wooden structures, the Little House on the Prairie version of history. But the photographic evidence shows something completely different: monumental stone architecture, classical design, urban sophistication that rivals European capitals. Look at population density maps from the 1840s. According to mainstream history, the American West was nearly empty, vast unpopulated territories. But how do you reconcile that with newspaper accounts of San Francisco being a well-known port in 1838? How do you explain the monumental architecture visible in every photograph? Someone has been editing the historical record. Certain facts are emphasized while others are erased. Timelines are adjusted. Buildings appear and disappear from photographs. Construction dates seem arbitrary or impossible. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but the questions are worth asking. When did San Francisco really begin? Who built the massive stone structures that appear in 1870s photographs? Why are there references to San Francisco as an established city more than a decade before it supposedly existed? Why are there no construction photographs of major buildings? Why do timelines omit the construction of dozens of monumental structures? The evidence suggests a different story than the one taught in schools. Perhaps a major civilization existed in North America long before the 1800s. Perhaps those structures were inherited rather than built by gold rush pioneers. Perhaps historical records were deliberately altered to hide this earlier chapter. Or perhaps there's another explanation entirely: advanced construction techniques we don't understand, rapid building methods lost to time, organized construction projects on a scale not documented in official records. The photographs don't lie. The architecture is real. The timeline is the problem. And until someone can explain how cowboys built European cathedrals in 2 decades using horse-drawn carriages, these questions will remain. What do you think happened in San Francisco? Look at the evidence yourself. Compare the official story to what the photographs actually show, and decide whether the timeline makes sense. Subscribe if you want more mysteries like this uncovered.